and I'm the manager for the sickle cell service in the community. I'd just like to thank you for this opportunity, for being able to come and talk to you today, and it's so nice to see so many of you here today. So what I'd like to cover is just what are we talking about when we talk about sickle cell, why do we encourage people to get tested, and what can be the effects for children and adults who have sickle cell anemia. Please do feel free to ask me any questions as we go along. One of the most important jobs that our body does is to help carry oxygen around our body. We can do without food for a while, we can do without water for a while, but every single cell in our body needs oxygen, otherwise you get tissue death. And the things that help us are our lungs when we breathe in and out. We have red blood cells, and then we have something called hemoglobin. So if we think of the red blood cells as being like cars, inside the red blood cell is a protein called hemoglobin, which is the passenger. And it's the hemoglobin that actually carries the oxygen around the body. So that's what I'm going to concentrate on, talking about hemoglobins today. Normal red blood cells are like a donut shape, and they're very, very soft and squidgy like jelly. And they can go through tiny, tiny blood vessels which are smaller than themselves. So they can squeeze through tiny blood vessels, come out the other end, and go back to their original shape. And most red blood cells live for about 120 days. We inherit the type of hemoglobin that we have, the hemoglobin that's inside the red blood cells, from both of our parents. The most common type of hemoglobin is hemoglobin A. Somebody had a look at it and then decided to call it hemoglobin A. And what would normally happen is that you get instructions from your mum on making hemoglobin A and instructions from your dad on making hemoglobin A, so that you have what is called hemoglobin AA. We know that in the world there are about 1,000 different types of hemoglobins apart from the hemoglobin A. And if it's not hemoglobin A, it has to be called something else. So we have things like hemoglobin C, D, hemoglobin D Punjab, lots of ones. And they don't affect people's lives, they don't affect their children, but they just carry the instruction for making a different type. And there are some that we do pay particular attention to, and one of them is hemoglobin S, or sickle hemoglobin. The problem with sickle hemoglobin is that it makes red blood cells go bananas. It makes it change shape. Normal red blood cells, when they give up oxygen, they stay the same shape. They don't change at all, and they stay nice and soft. Red blood cells that contain the sickle hemoglobin, or the hemoglobin S, when they give up oxygen, they change into a sickle shape, that's how it gets its name, or a banana shape. And these sickle or banana shapes, they're not designed to go through these tiny blood vessels, so they can block up tiny blood vessels. So this is just to sort of show the difference between the two different types of hemoglobin. I've already said that normal hemoglobin is disc shape, or like a donut. It's soft, like a bag of jelly, and it goes through tiny blood vessels and lives for about 120 days. Red blood cells that carry the sickle hemoglobin, or hemoglobin S, when they give up oxygen, change to a different shape, and they become very hard as well, and jagged. And that's what they turn into. And as I said before, they're not designed to go through those tiny blood vessels. And because they're a lot more fragile as well, they only live for about 20 days, which is a big difference from 120 days. So, very, very busy slide here for you. I'm not going to talk all the way through it, but what I do want to point out is that every single cell in our body needs oxygen. So any part of our body that's not getting oxygen, you can get cell death, tissue death, which can lead to long-term complications. So people who either carry the sickle hemoglobin or have what we call sickle cell anemia, which is where they don't make any normal hemoglobin, have lots of problems sometimes. Some of the problems they can have are that because the cells only last for 20 days instead of the 120, they can be anemic, and so they can be very tired. That can lead to sort of problems with their concentration. So with children particularly, it's important that we notify teachers about that, so they don't label the children as lazy. Make them very tired, weak. And the clumping of red blood cells, because they can cause damage to any organ in your body, it can lead to long-term complications. So it can damage the heart, the lungs, the kidneys, the muscles, the brain. And in particular, it can affect one organ in our body called the spleen. The spleen is like a big fish-shaped muscle or organ, and it helps to filter out things that shouldn't be in the blood. So very good for getting rid of things like bacteria that shouldn't be there. But because the spleen itself can get damaged from the sickling or the changing of the red blood cells, people who have sickle cell anemia, the hemoglobin SS, they can have problems fighting infection. So this is just to kind of give you a bit of an overview of how it can affect different people.
Look.
What I want to just kind of point out is that earlier what I said was that you inherit the type of hemoglobin that you have from both your parents. Normally what would happen is that you pass on hemoglobin A from one parent and hemoglobin A from the other parent. So your hemoglobin AA. What can also happen is that one parent can pass on the normal hemoglobin, which is hemoglobin A, and then the other parent can pass on the S hemoglobin. So you're what is known as a healthy carrier, hemoglobin AS. So for the carriers, what's happening is that in their blood, they've got lots and lots of red blood cells that carry the normal hemoglobin. They carry the oxygen round, makes no problems. But they also have some cells that carry the sickle hemoglobin, and they're the ones that can change shape. So we say that these people are healthy carriers, but what we'd like to sort of encourage is for people to get tested to see if they might be carriers, because although it doesn't cause problems to their everyday lives, under certain circumstances they can have the same sickling crisis that people with SS can have as well. And it's extreme conditions like dehydration, severe dehydration, and also very low oxygen levels. So if somebody decided they were going to be a mountaineer and go to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro without all the right equipment, they could have problems. But the other time to remember is when they need a general anaesthetic. So it would be very important for someone who's a carrier to be able to tell the anaesthetist and the doctors that they're carriers, because they would just have extra oxygen given to them. So I think it's very important to know your status really from that point of view. And the other reason to know whether you're a carrier for hemoglobin S or for any other type of abnormal or different hemoglobin is because we know these are things that get passed on. So they're all genetic conditions. And so what we try to do is encourage people to get tested before they start their family, to get the partner tested, so that they know what their sort of options are. So it doesn't mean that you can't fall in love with whoever you want to, it doesn't mean you can't have children with whoever you want to. It just means before you start a family, you can have a conversation about, okay, this is where we're at, this is what we'd do, rather than the lady's pregnant and then you're having to have that discussion at that point. So one of the things that we're trying to do in the community is